It's Yodua that there's a big machlokes in terms of chronologically speaking when this story took place. I mean, we started Parshas Yisro right after we finished Parshas Beshalach. We're certainly going in order. And Parshas Beshalach ended with the Yidden being in Refidim. So it sounds like there was no masois to be spoken of between then and now. So Vayishma Yisro Choyim Midyan would seem to suggest that this story took place in Refidim. It means it took place between the time that the Yidden had left Mitzrayim and the time that the Yidden had been Mekabel the Torah. Stating that, there is a major Yeshayimrim that holds that Yisro came not when the Yidden were in Refidim, but rather Yisro came after the Yidden had already received the Torah. The makar to this Yeshayimrim is a Gemara Masechtes Zvachim, Daf Yomi learned it only a few weeks ago, on Daf Kuftes Nayin Amid Aleph, just to read two excerpts of a Gemara. The Gemara says, B'nei Reb Chia v'Reb Yeshua ben Levi. There was a machlokes between the sons of Reb Chia and Reb Yeshua ben Levi. Chadama once said, Yisro koydem Matan Torah haya. Yisro arrived before Matan Torah. Chadama, the other one said, Yisro acher Matan Torah haya. That Yisro arrived after Matan Torah. Skipping a little bit, the Gemara says, Kitanoi, this machlokes between the B'nei Reb Chia and Reb Yeshua ben Levi, who were both Amoyram, is really even an earlier machlokes. It's already a machlokes Tanoim. It says, Vayishma Yisro koyim midyan. Ma shmua shama uba. What was the shmua that Yisro heard? Rabbi Shua says, Milchemes Amalek shama. What he heard was the Milchama of Amalek. How do I know that? Shariksev b'tzidai. Because look at the pasuk that immediately precedes Vayishma Yisro. Vayachlosh Yeshua as Amalek. Ves Amel lefichar. Rabbi Laz Amidai said, Matan Torah shama uva. What he heard was Matan Torah. Says the Gemara, what's the machlokes? The machlokes is, did Yisro come before Matan Torah, or did he come after Matan Torah? If he came after Matan Torah, you could say Matan Torah shama uva. If, however, he came before Matan Torah, it can't be that what he heard was Matan Torah. It must be something else. What's that something else? Says Rabbi Yeshua, the something else was the Milchemes Amalek, right? That's that other thing that he had heard. But the bottom line is, in the Gemara in Zvachim, Daf Kuf Tezayin, it would seem to be a machlokes Tanoim, whether Yisro came before Matan Torah or Yisro came after Matan Torah. If you open up a Chumash and you look around in the Rishonim a little bit, you'll see it's a big machlokes in the Mefarshei HaChumash, whether Yisro came before Matan Torah or Yisro came after Matan Torah. The Ramban says that I think the way you have to read these psukim are the way they're mentioned in the Torah. And if the story of Vayishma Yisro comes immediately after the story of Amalek, and it comes when the Yidden are in Refidim, before the Rebbe Zaliyah, before the Yidden are going to be Mekabel the Torah, that means Yisro came before Matan Torah. Davin Ezra's chaylik. Davin Ezra says there's no question that Yisro did not come when the Yidden were in Refidim, but rather Yisro came Lacha Matan Torah. In other words, what's a machlokes the B'nei Reb Chia and Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, what's a machlokes between Rabbi Yeshua and Rabbi Lazar HaMaidai is also machlokes between the Ramban and the Ibn Ezra. So you don't get this every day. It's a machlokes Amayram, it's a machlokes Tanam, and it's a machlokes Rishayim. Right? I almost feel like saying, what do you think? Right? Maybe we could also argue. So it seems like everybody argued this point. It's unbelievable. It's fascinating. Right? Usually if the Tanam argue, it's machlokes Tanam, Amayram. Now the Ibn Ezra and the Ramban, what are they arguing? Who's right? Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi or the B'nei Reb Chia or Rabbi Yeshua, Rabbi Lazar HaMaidai? So this is very interesting. But the bottom line is, there's a big shaila when exactly the story of Yisro came. Now, why is it such a shaila? The reason it's such a shaila is because really there's very, very conflicting clues in terms of how exactly this played out. The primary raya to the position that Yisro came before Matan Torah is the location of the pasuk Vayishma Yisro, and then ultimately Vayava Yisro. Right? It says it right after the story of Refidim and right before the Yidden are Mekabel Torah. So just based on the location, it sounds like that's how it happened. There's another raya that the Rishonim mention in making their argument, and that is Vayishma Yisro Chayin Midyan Chaysa Moshe. What did he hear? Ki hoitzi Hashem es Yisrael mi Mitzrayim. The Rishonim argue that if Yisro would have came after Matan Torah, he would have been motivated to come not just because Hashem took the Yidden out of Mitzrayim. That's nice, but it would have been Ma'amid Har Sinai Shama Uba, and the pasuk doesn't say that. And being that the pasuk says that Yisro is talking to Moshe, wow, I heard about Yitzias Mitzrayim, and Moshe is telling Yisro, yeah, you didn't hear nothing. Let me tell you what really happened, right? That mitzvah of Sipur that the Brisker Rav said applies to any davar type that happens to a person, but he doesn't say one word about Maimon Har Sinai. There's no question that the gagal gag of all the nisim and aflois that took place, the greatest hiskalus of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Ata Reisel Adas Ki Hashem Hu Elokim Einoid Milvadei, that came from Maimon Har Sinai. And if Yisro and Moshe are not saying one word about Maimon Har Sinai, it doesn't sound like he showed up after Maimon Har Sinai. Because otherwise you would think that would have been the talk of the town, and that's what they'd be discussing, and they're not discussing that. So if that's the case, the Rishonim, that would seem to be another raya, advantage, the argument that holds that Yisro came chronologically the way it's presented here in the Psukim. But there's many rayas the other way. The biggest, without a question, is Pasuk Hey, right at the beginning of the parsha. Vayava Yisro choysa Moshe uvana ve'ishtay al Moshe ela midbar asher hu choyne sham haru Elokim. And the Pasuk says before she showed up in haru Elokim. I hear it's not geschmack that the Torah would say it before the Torah tells us that Gideon arrived in haru Elokim. I hear, why is there no mention of them talking about Maimon Har Sinai? And where does he come? He comes to Har Elokim. There's another very strong clue. And that is, Yisro wakes up the next day and he sees Moshe Rabbeinu is teaching Torah. And he's teaching Torah. He's teaching Torah. They didn't receive the Torah. What does that even mean? And besides, Moshe Rabbeinu was busy from the morning until the evening. What's he busy with? They didn't get the Torah yet. Now you could tell me, what do you mean? They got some mitzvahs when they were Mitzrayim, in Mara. But they got dinim in Mara, right? They got dinim in Mara. So that's would explain why they're so busy with dinim. But if they didn't get Taryag mitzvahs yet, and there was no Kabbalah Satira yet, so it's a little bit hard to understand how this would play itself out. Not just that. The last pasuk that we read right before Revi, Vayishalach Moshe es choisnoi, Vayelech lo al artzoi. Moshe Rabbeinu sent his shver away, Vayelech lo al artzoi, and he goes back home. Now, Yisro for sure didn't go back home before Matan Torah. When does Yisro go back home? So it's actually Psukim in Parshas Ba'aloischa. He goes back about a year after Matan Torah. So Vayishalach Moshe es choisnei vayelech lo al artzoi for sure can't be in chronological order. And if that pasuk is not in chronological order, so you see this whole pasuk is out of place over here. It has to be that we just lumped it here for some reason, but in reality it's out of place, and for sure this did not take place in chronological order. Because to say Vayishalach Moshe es choisnoi vayelech lo al artzoi happened chronologically, that's something that's completely impossible. But there's another very clear raya. And this is from Mishnah Torah. This is from Parshas Dvarim. So when the story of Yisro is recounted, listen to how it's presented. So this is Perek Aleph Pasuk Vav. Hashem Elokeinu diber eleinu b'chayrav leimor. Rav lechem sheves b'har hazeh. Right? What do we need from this pasuk? The Yidden were at Har Sinai, and it's time to start traveling. Pnu usulachem. Right? It's time to start heading in the direction of Eretz Canaan. This is Perek Aleph Pasuk Vav. Pasuk Yud Beis, skipping 6 psukim. Moshe Rabbeinu turns to Hashem and he says, Eicha esel avadi. It is too much for me. Tarchachem, umasachem, verivchem. Havu lochem anoshim chachavim unavoyim, v'yiduim l'sheftechem. V'asimem b'roshech, v'ekachas roshi sheftechem anoshim chachavim v'yiduim. V'eten oisem roshim aleichem. Sorry alofim, sorry meos, sorry chamishim, sorry asaros. And all of a sudden the Eitz of Yisro comes in. So here in the recounting of the Eitz of Yisro, it's so clear it happened after Maimon Har Sinai. So again, you have another very strong raya that the story of Yisro had to have happened after Matan Torah. It's mentioned before Matan Torah, it's a kasha. But the bottom line is, it seems to have happened after Matan Torah. By the way, all 4 rayas that we just mentioned, number 1, Yisro arrives in Har Elokim. Number 2, Moshe Rabbeinu was teaching Torah. Number 3, Moshe sends Yisro away. And number 4, Mefurish, just from the sequence of the psukim in Sefer Devarim that Ibn Ezra brings. These are all rayas that he brings, and he concludes based on this. There's no choice but to say, Ein muktem and because a mukta mulcha b'Torah must be, this whole inyan is being presented out of order. It is what it is. Take a look at the Gaon, the Vilna Gaon, Aderes Eliyahu. This is in Parshas Dvarim. Just to read one line. V'omer aleichem ba'esahi Yisro bola acha Matan Torah. Yisro came after Matan Torah. K'moshe moichichem apsukim, like the psukim prove. So the Vilna Gaon picked sides, and the Vilna Gaon said it's pasha to me that Yisro came when Yisro came after Matan Torah. Now it is kedai to mention one thing, and that is, even though it's a shaila, did Yisro come before Matan Torah? Did Yisro come after Matan Torah? But that's pashat. The shaila is only when Yisro showed up at the scene. But without a question, you can't argue. A lot of what happens here in the beginning of Parashas Yisro for sure happened lachem Matan Torah. And that's really what the Manda Omer that holds Yisro came before Matan Torah is going to say. He's going to say, one second, I never said everything from the beginning of the parasha until Revi happened before Matan Torah. I'm not saying that when Moshe Rabbeinu was teaching Torah, he's teaching it before Matan Torah. I'm not saying even that Yisro gave the Eitzah for Matan Torah. You never heard those words come out of my mouth. Certainly, Vayishalach Moshe es choisnei vayelech lo yal artzai. I'm not saying that happened before. That for sure happened after Matan Torah. I'm just saying Yisro arrived at the scene for Matan Torah. So again, we have to know what the machlokes is. The shaila is everything in order? For sure, everything is not in order. There's a chelik of it that's out of order. There's an ein mukdam u'me'ucha b'Torah. The question is, when did Yisro arrive at the scene? Did Yisro arrive at the scene koydem Matan Torah, or did Yisro arrive at the scene after Matan Torah? And the emes, it's a pella, because if your old Yisro came after Matan Torah, this whole parasha is out of order. It's ein mukdam u'me'ucha b'Torah, right? And even if your old that Yisro came before Matan Torah, but part of it we just said for sure happened lachem Matan Torah. So here, all of a sudden, we have a parasha that's completely out of order. I mean, we've been learning Chumash together now as a chabura for a long time, right? I think it's the first time where we have not the idea of an ein mukdam u'me'ucha b'Torah, but such a dramatic idea of an ein mukdam u'me'ucha b'Torah. It's an anomaly. Again, it's a card we pull out when we have to, but it's not something that you're allowed to use irresponsibly, right? So it's something that if you have to use it, you have to use it. And here we have a whole parsha in the Torah that's completely ein mukdam u'me'ucha b'Torah. So I was thinking, Lulei de Mistafina. The Chafetz Chaim in the Sefer Shmiras Haloshen. This is in Shar HaTorah, Perek Aleph. He quotes a Yalkut Tehillim. It's Remes Tov Reish Chaf Hey, if you want to look it up. Amar Rabbi Lazar. Rabbi Lazar said, Lo nitnu parshiyas HaTorah al HaSeder. The parashas of the Torah were not presented al HaSeder. Shalmali nitnu al HaSeder. Because if the parashas were written al HaSeder, kol misha haya koyru behen, any person that would read from a Sefer Torah, haya yachal lahacha yois meisen v'lasis moifsim. The power of the Torah is so incredible that if a person would sit down and he would read from the Psukei HaTorah and he would read them in order, you know what kind of superpower he would develop? He would have the ability to be Mechayim Mesim, and he would have the ability to make Moifsim. Lokach Nis'ala Mehem Sidrei Shel HaTorah. It's for that reason the Seder of the Torah is not the way it was really supposed to be. That's why there's things out of order. It's only HaKadosh Baruch Hu that knows the right order. Shenemar Umicha Moini Yikra. But says the Yalkut that the Torah was given purposely in this deceptive way. When we sit down and we read the Torah, we're not reading it 100% in order. It's the order that we're supposed to read it in, but it's not the order that HaKadosh Baruch Hu knows. The real order is Galu L'fnei HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But as far as we're concerned, we have this other order. Why can't we know the right way? Because if we would know the right way, the Torah would be such a powerful tool. Kol misha haya koyru bahen, haya yachal lahachiyos meisen, v'lasif smoifsin. It would be too much. And it's for that reason the Torah had to be written in this way. Chafetz Chaim brings this to bring out the koyach of Torah. He says people don't understand what they're doing when they're learning Torah. He says every word of Torah, every pasuk of Torah is such an incredible inyan of dveikus b'HaKadosh Baruch Hu. He's tapping in to something that pre-existed the world. It's the Yisayid, it's the Shirish, it's the source of chiyus of the entire world. And the Chafetz Chaim, when he wanted to give a mashal for it, he said, take a look at this Yalkut. There's a concept of ein mukdam u'me'ucha b'Torah. You know why there's such a concept? Because if a person would read the Torah in order, I don't know, but Lulei de Mistafina, maybe the reason the beginning of Parshas Yisro is written, Ein mukdam u'me'ucha b'Torah, it's because we're about to be Makabel the Torah. And this is really a hakdama to Kabbalah Torah. To understand what it means, the Torah. Chafetz Chaim felt this was, imagine from all the chazals that you have about the Torah, Chafetz Chaim picked this one. He says, you want to know what Torah is? He says, there's an idea that we don't know the proper state of the Torah. Torah goes ahead right before, almost like everything's been going so perfect. In the world of Pshutei Shal Mikra, right? We're we're cruising. And all of a sudden, I have a parsha that happened in a year from now. It happened yesterday. I'm so confused. Everything's out of order. It's true. It's a little bit of a hakdama to Kabbalah Satira. The hakdama to Kabbalah Satira is that Torah is so gewaldig, it's so incredible. We can't even know the Seder HaParshias. Because if we would know the Seder HaParshias, it would be such a dangerous weapon. You'd be able to be Mechayim, in a good way. You'd be able to be Mechayim Mesim, you'd be able to make Moisim, and this is something that's not meant to be. It's for that reason the Torah gave us a Parsha, right before the Parsha, Maimon Har Sinai. A Parsha that shows the greatness of the Torah. A parsha that brings out this inyan. What is that? It's a mukdam Torah. Either way, we're just getting started here. Parshas Yisro. I mean, if we thought Parshas B'Shalach was loaded, we ain't seen nothing yet. Parshas Yisro is I mean, we could spend mamish the rest of the year learning Parshas Yisro together. We, of course, are going to do what we do, but in the next parsha, it's going to be B'Chodesh HaShlishi already. It's already going to be Rosh Chodesh Sivan. The Yidden are going to arrive at Har Sinai. They're going to start preparing for a moment that is literally going to change the course of history. A moment that was predetermined from the beginning of time. A moment that is going to fulfill the tachlis of why HaKadosh Baruch Hu created the world. The moment of Maimon Har Sinai.